But what I would like to share is something that I think has become more evident to me during the pandemic, and that is this notion of awareness-based collective action. And what I mean by that is that, what's meant by collective action, go one more time, there we go. What's meant by collective action is a collaborative effort that takes place in groups and diverges from the social norms of the situation. And so when we think about what the social norms are within the human service, particularly services for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, they aren't great, right? We find ourselves oftentimes kind of up against social norms that really don't make sense to most of us. So this notion of calling together a collaborative effort that is going to diverge from that kind of norm. And so within our organization, we see leadership as an invitation to collective action. And as such, since everyone within the organization should be part of this extending invitations to citizens and opportunities, that makes us all leaders. So I want to talk about what this collective action has looked like in the lives of one of the women that we support, whose name is Shanae. And this is a gorgeous picture of Shanae in front of the YMCA. I'm sure she was just coming from Body Pump or something. But Shanae had a pretty crummy life when we met her, and she would have been what we call in residential service land. And so these were some of the details about what her life looked like. She lived in 4 homes in 5 years, and Adult Protective Services had been involved in several of those. She was moved about with no input. All right, back. She had been moved about with no input or forewarning. So when she went to our day program back when we had one, her case manager picked her up one day with a great big black bags of clothes and dropped her off at her new home, where a person she had never met would be helping her take a shower that evening. She had had 6 state guardians in a matter of 5 years and did not have the right to vote. She lived in a family home provider, a virtually adult foster care home, where she lived in one room, literally the front living room, because it was the only doorway wide enough for her to get through. So all of her activities, hygiene, dinner, sleeping, everything took place in that same one room. There was no door on that bedroom for privacy, and it was shared with another person with one of those kind of medical looking, curtains on wheels kind of thing. She was not allowed to see her boyfriend, nor was she allowed to have church or family friends to visit. She had no personal belongings. The room could have looked like anybody lived there. No indication that Shanae was the inhabitant there. She was considered a guest by the neighbors. The neighbors saw her as the woman who was staying with, right, the foster parent there. It was located too far from her church and the YMCA to be able to use public transport. And so there was no transportation available to her. And so she literally went back and forth between the day program and that one room house. The FHP, of course, was earning equity via the rent that Shanae was paying, and Shanae was very much seen as a child, a dependent, and a client. So you can see this time bomb here. It was no surprise that Shanae's mental health was just really escalating, and she had a very difficult time. And so something had to be done. So when we became involved, one of the first things that we needed to do, in addition to getting to know Shanae better, was to understand what it was that was important to her, what she really wanted her life to look like. And amazingly enough, as difficult as Shanae's life had been, she had still been able to hold on to images of things being different. And I think that's pretty amazing. Unlike some other people that we know who just either have given up or can't imagine life different, Shanae was able to imagine, being involved with a regular ladies' night out, being part of a supper club, learning how to cook the kind of food she grew up on, working, having a stronger family, being a social butterfly, living in a place that was close to her brother, going to the salon on a regular basis to get her hair done, just simple kinds of things. But none of these things had been a possibility for Shanae in the past. One of the things that we knew was that as long as Shanae lived in the residential world, the service land, that it was very unlikely that any of the things that were going to that she wanted to happen were going to happen. And so we knew that one of the first things was she really needed to be supported to have what we call a home of one's own. And so this is where our collaborations began, right? This idea of collective action outside of the social norms. And one of the most unlikely folks ended up coming forward as Shanae's landlord. Shanae had a Section 8 voucher. We had been looking for almost a year. In fact, she had to keep renewing her eligibility for the voucher because we could literally find nothing, I mean nothing, that was accessible or was affordable for Shanae. We continued to reach out and talk to whoever would talk to us about it and networking. And the most unlikely character came forward. This is Kurt. Kurt is a direct support provider at Mattingly Edge. And I know what he gets paid. And you wouldn't think that he would be able to be a landlord. But he had just bought a new home and was planning to sell his. And he came to me and he said, if there's any way we can make the dollars work where I could afford to keep that house, I would love to be Shanae's landlord. And thus we began additional collaborations, right? The next person that came along in Shanae's life here is a guy named Don. And Don is a contractor. He owns a business, remodeling and rehabbing business. And he really runs his business as a social enterprise and wants to be involved in projects and efforts that matter. And so Dawn went to visit Shanae's house. There was a lot of work that needed to be done. The bathroom wasn't accessible. The house wasn't accessible. There was a number of things that needed to happen. And so Dawn came and put together a proposal for what it would take to make Shanae's house accessible. Mattingly Edge did contract with Dawn. In the end, we ended up paying him for about 10% of the time that he spent rehabbing at Shanae's. We also needed to watch cost because Kurt certainly didn't have the money to fix up the house, and nor did Shanae, nor did Mattingly Edge. And so we hosted over a 3-month period of time every Saturday work days where we got volunteers from churches, from businesses, from Mattingly Edge, some family members of other people we support at Mattingly Edge, board members, employees came together to really rehab the house. And you can see in the background that purple, you can tell the decor now looks like Shanae because purple's her color and she painted the whole inside of her house purple. The next thing that Shanae was going to need was someone to live with her. At that time, she still had a state guardian and was required to have supervision 24 hours a day. And so the services she was eligible for, of course, would not cover 24 hours a day. And so we assisted Shanae to recruit a housemate. And how this works is that Carlin lives with Shanae for free in exchange for being there overnight, 5 nights a week during the sleeping hours for Shanae's safety and security. And so Carlin joined this collective action, right? And then there were lots of other people. Shanae's moving team, you recognize Whitney there, and that's Lisa. We had recruited a number of people to help Shanae move, but unfortunately, Shanae didn't have that much stuff to move, and so it was a pretty easy and quick move that day. So Shanae moved in and it created lots of new opportunities, but it also created a lot of problems because her state guardian was opposed to Shanae having access to the internet, having an email address. She refused for Shanae's story to be told publicly, even though it was really important to Shanae. And so we had been working even before Shanae moved on recruiting a private guardian for Shanae. And this is Megan, who stepped forward in a private capacity. Megan happens to be an attorney and happened to be the sister of one of our employment specialists. And Megan stepped forward and applied to become Shanae's guardian, which has been a tremendous improvement in the quality of Shanae's life and her autonomy. The plan and the hope is that Megan will work closer with Shanae, as will we, to help her learn and become more competent in some of the ways that the court would require for her to actually get her own legal rights back. And so we'll be working over the upcoming 3 or 4 or 5 years toward that kind of goal. So another person joined the collective action. And so now Shanae is living her best life, right? She actually went to court and got the right to vote back. And so she has voted, and it was particularly important to her in this and the last election. She has pretty strong feelings about that white man. And Shanae's learning to do a lot more things for herself, right? She's learning to cook. Her family, she made a beef stew there, as you can tell, and invited her family, which is one of the benefits of her having a home. She now gets to see her family a lot more often, and that's really important to her. This is obviously after COVID, but was a socially distanced birthday party for Shanae. We can remember the day when we first met Shanae where her party was at Chuck E. Cheese's. So this was, even in the days of COVID, was quite the improvement over that kind of situation. And so I'm going to stop the sharing here for a second. And so the idea really is that what people need the most in life, to have the kind of life, to have a home of one's own, and to have a sense of belonging, and to have a job, and to have all of the things that most of us take for granted on this call, that we don't have it to give people. It's not within our power, right, to hand to people these things. But what we can do is incite collective action, incite and help bring other people into folks' lives that help bring about those kinds of opportunities. And so Shanae's life is very different. She has a ways to go. What's next on her list? She's really clear about what's next on her list. She wants a boyfriend and she wants a job. And so those are our barking orders going forward. And so we certainly will start and begin to support Shanae around those kinds of things. But I think this is a fundamentally different way of thinking about who and what we are as service providers, right? Because we are a direct support organization that provides services that are funded by Medicaid dollars. And so, the idea that we can only be a conduit to the people that can offer and help people take steps toward a good life is really a different way of thinking about what your mission is and what your purpose is to be. And so some of you all will be old enough to remember this, some of you won't, but remember the day when way back, couldn't tell you the year even, but the Oliver North School of Helping, somebody mentioned to me, right? So something happened, right? There was an exchange of something, but nobody knows exactly how it happened. And I think that's the magic. That's the magic that we're trying to identify ourselves, is what is it that, how can we be behind the scenes enough where our role is to help bring the necessary people and resources and opportunities into a person's life, and that's the function of an organization like ours and of the direct support workers who spend time directly with people. So it's a really simple concept, but fundamentally a different change. One of the last things I'll share is just that, and it's a really important part of what we do at Mattingly Edge, and that is clarity about who we work for. And the problem with Medicaid funded services and providers is that they too often believe that Medicaid calls the shots. right? And we just do what Medicaid tells us to do, whether it serves people well or not. And so the executive director before me had this analogy, and I like it a lot, that we refuse to be a Medicaid plantation, right? We have refused to run a Medicaid plantation, that we instead partner with people around what they want their lives to look like, what it'll take to get there, who needs to be a part of that, and that we help in the background, try to help make those things happen. And I'm really proud to be part of a board that explicitly says that we do what it is people want and need, and whatever part Medicaid wants to contribute toward that, we're glad to take their money. But very few of the people of whose faces you saw were paid to be a part of Shanae's life. Very few of the people that you saw were associated directly with Mattingly Edge. Their affiliation is more with Shanae than with our organization. So we had a tiny bit of time, I think, looks like a couple of minutes left, and I'd be really curious about comments or questions, or the best part of the Summer Institute was always the interaction. And so it's harder to do on these Zoom calls, but I'd really welcome questions, comments. Hey.
Hey.
How are ya?
I'm good, Hope. How you do?
I'm doing great. You got some thoughts about this?
Yeah, I would say, it is so good that she is doing what she loves now. Mm-hmm. And she didn't need to go through hell like that,
She didn't.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine myself even going through that. Like that would just drive me nuts.
Yeah. Well, and it's going to take her, her healing from that experience, right, is not overnight. Like moving into your own home and having a new guardian that respects your autonomy is great, but there's a lot of healing to be done, and one of the things I love most about this work is that just rarely, if ever, do people let you down. Like Shanae is really rising to the occasion, and becoming the woman she was born to be, really, and so hope next time I tell her story, she just might have a job.
I'm so curious. Was that her brother in one of the pictures where the wall was being painted purple? Is her brother able to participate as much as he would like?
That was not her brother. That was actually a board member of ours, Billy, and it's not her brother. Shanae, for really complicated reasons, has decided to not have her brother in her life anymore. So her family, when she talks about family coming over, it's primarily her mother, an aunt, a sister, and her sister's young son, elementary age son, is her family. So she sees them regularly now, where she would go months at a time without.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, can I share a little plug for Shanae?
Please do, Whitney.
So this Shanae's story is very close to my heart, and she and I worked through most of this stuff together. And this year for the TASH conference, it has to be virtual, which is a bummer, but Shanae finally, for the first time, has the rights to share her own story. And so she and I will be presenting her story, and she gets to tell her story in her words as a part of the TASH conference this year.
Okay, so I've got my talking stick.
That is awesome.
It's my math. This is Barb McKenzie from Ohio and actually Ohio TASH. And so congratulations on all the TASH stuff going on, especially to you, Hope.
Thank you.
I'm really glad that you had that. I just love all the stories that are being told about really, I know it's an often used term, thinking out of the box, but just such creative thinking, you know, reach the way you happen to fall into the person who owned the house. And, you know, not that you fell into it, I'm sure it took a lot of searching, but I just love all of that. I just think that's so good. And I hate it to see people give up so easily, especially systems. If it's not in this box, we cannot do it. And it's sad.
Well, and that's exactly right. I mean, the moral or the theme of Shanae's story really is, you know, persistence, because she literally, you know, it took us 5 years, and you know, a lot of little miracles, a whole lot of little miracles to come together. So we have to get better as organizations at, like you said, not giving up, persisting, and doing the hard thing. Just doing the hard thing.
But you're
really,
holding to the funding and whatever that systems hold, though, and that's what's sad.
But we can only do the hard thing if we're willing to reach out and invite others to help, right? Like, it is hard. Like, it is impossible really to do. I mean, I think organizations give up because they don't have the capacity themselves to do it.